Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to another cozy episode of our bedtime history tales. Before we dive into the story that's about to lull you into a peaceful slumber, if this is the kind of chill, fascinating content that makes you hit the off late, you'd be over the 7. If you could spare a quick thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. No pressure though, sort of like really like UV break. So only if you genuinely dig what we're serving up here.
Now here's a fun little thing I'd love from you. Drop a comment telling me where you retuning in from and what time it is for you right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing we all winding down together, even if we like miles apart. All right, it's time to set the mood. Dim those lights, turn on that trusty old fan for some soothing white noise, and get comfy. So tonight we just peeling back the layers of one of history most iconic inventors, Thomas Edison. But we not just talking about light bulbs and phonographs. We just delving into the wild drama-filled world of his patent wars, just the legal battles, the rivalries, and the side of Edison that S equal parts genius and just like laugh, unquote. Well, let's just say a bit of a patentist drama king. Before Thomas Edison became the poster boy for the light bulb, he was already knee-deep in patent drama. Most people picture him as a solitary genius in a dimly lit lab, but the real Edison spent just as much time in lawyers' offices as he did with test tubes. His whole journey to invention fame, when Meti was paved with cease and desist letters, courtroom showdowns, and some seriously shady kind of business tactics. Born in 1847. So Edison dropped out of school at 12 and started hustling early. He worked as a telegraph operator, but instead of just sending messages, he tinkered with the equipment. His first big break came with the electrographic vote recorder in 1869. Laugh Unca machine that counted votes faster than humans. Sounds useful, right? Politicians hated it because it sped up pretty boring meetings. Lesson 1 for young Edison: innovation doesn't always actually sell. Undeterred, he moved to New York and set up shop as anxious inventor for hire daily companies, paid him to solve technical problems, and he quickly learned that protecting his ideas was just as important as just creating them. Enter the United States Patent Office, Edison's new best friend and worst enemy in those days. The patent system was a Wild West. Laugh, sort of like Unca. People often fought over who invented what first. Edison, ever the opportunist, decided to play rough. His strategy: file patents for everything, even half-baked ideas. Laugh, he once said daily, anything that won't sell, so I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is success. Ego translation: laugh, if it makes money, it's worth fighting for. So this mindset led him to build an empire of over 1,000 patents during his lifetime, but it also earned him enemies faster than he could say, hold like Eureka. By the 1870s, Edison wasn't just an inventor, he was a brand. Laugh. So his lab in Menlo Park, New Jersey, became known as the Invention Factory. It constantly line out grow at an alarming rate. But behind the scenes, his team of researchers often did most of the heavy lifting. Edison took credit, laugh, sort of like Uncut, and the patents just uncut for their work. It wasn't exactly ethical, but in the cutthroat world of 19th century innovation, it was business as usual. As we'll see in the next section, Edison's first major patent showdown wasn't over the light bulb, just like laugh, just like is over something far weirder. The phonograph. Spoiler alert, it involved a rival inventor named Alexander Graham Bell, and things got ugly fast. The battle over the phonograph patent was like the original tech bro feud, decades before Silicon Valley even existed. In 1877, Edison unveiled his tinfoil phonograph star, like a contraption that could record and play back like sound. It was a technological marvel, but here's the catch. Edison didn't think it had so much practical use. He jotted down a list of potential applications, including team letter writing and download phonograph books for blind people. But then shelved the project to focus on other things. Really big mistake. Enter Alexander Graham. Like Bell, the telephone guy, Bell's team improved Edison's design, replacing tinfoil with wax cylinders and creating a more reliable playback system. By 1886, Bell's Salzburg laboratory had a product ready for market. Edison, who'd been ignoring his phonograph baby, suddenly woke up and smelled the money. He rushed to file an updated patent, claiming Bell's version was just a rip. So off of his original idea, the patent fight turned into a legal slugfest. Edison's lawyers dug up old lab notes and witnesses to prove he was the true inventor. Bell's team countered with evidence that their changes were significant enough to warrant a separate patent. Newspapers ate it up, turning the dispute into entertainment. One headline read, "Daily War of the Wizards, Edison vs. So Bell for sound like supremacy." Edison. But Edison didn't just rely on lawyers. He played the public relations game too. He invited journalists to his lab for demonstrations, showing off his improvedly like flashy display. Meanwhile, he leaked stories about Bell Snickcook like copymaker, painting himself as the underdog fighting for justice. It was like classic Edison, if you can. She went on technical merit, win on perception. In 1888, the courts finally ruled in Edison's favor, but the victory was so messy. Bell's team didn't go down without a fight, and the legal bills just piled up for both sides. Edison's win set a precedent, though in the world of invention, timing and aggression mattered just as much as creativity. This wasn't the last time he used the patent system as a weapon. Laugh just like laugh UV break on kid, and definitely wasn't the last time he butt heads with another famous inventor. As Edison tightened his grip on the phonograph market, he was already eyeing his next big target, like the electrification of America. But this time, the stakes were even higher, and the competition was just about to get a whole lot tougher. When Edison decided to electrify the world, he didn't just want to sell light bulbs, just like so, he wanted to own the entire electrical ecosystem. His plan: build a direct current DC power grid from scratch, patent every part of it, and crush any competitor who dared to challenge his monopoly. Welcome to Edison's study business debate tour playbook, where innovation met cutthroat capitalism. Edison's Pearl Street station in New York City, opened in 1882, was a technological masterpiece. It lit up 85 buildings with DC power, so basically proving that electricity could replace gas lamp. But DC had a major flaw, so it couldn't travel long distances without losing voltage. Instead of admitting defeat, Edison doubled down. He flooded the patent office with applications for every possible DC-related invention. On transformers, generators, even light fixtures. His goal: make it impossible for rivals to enter the market. Enter George Westinghouse, Edison's new arch nemesis. Westinghouse believed in alternating current technology that could actually transmit power over hundreds of miles. Edison dismissed as too dangerous guy, not entirely wrong, but still, and launched a smear campaign. He staged public demonstrations like electrocuting animals with trying to convince the public it was a death trap. One newspaper dubbed it "Download the War of the Currents." Edison played the role of the fiery crusader against evil technology. But Edison's tactics went beyond PR stunts. His lawyers sued Westinghouse for patent infringement, claiming stole ideas from his DC system. So the case dragged on for years, costing both sides like a fortune. Edison even tried to patent the very concept of electrical distribution, a move so audacious, it so bordered on so ridiculous in his mind. If he couldn't own the future of electricity, no one could. Despite his best efforts, Edison just couldn't stop the rise of Westinghouse's system, was simply more practical and cost-effective. By the 1890s, it dominated the power grid laugh, so leaving Edison's DC empire in ruin. But instead of admitting defeat gracefully, he just doubled down on litigation, turning into the ultimate sore loser. Laugh, the war of the currents, wasn't just a battle of technology like Unti. It was just a clash of egos, and Edison's refusal to compromise would define his legacy as much as his invention. As Edison licked his wounds from the DC debacle, he was already plotting his next patent power grab. This time, he'd leave the world of electricity behind and dive headfirst into the unpredictable realm of mining. Spoiler alert, laugh so it wouldn't just go as planned. The whole world of 19th century telegraphy was a cutthroat business, and Edison waded right into the middle of it, ready to stir up trouble. Laugh, Western Union, the telegraph giant of the era, was both his client and his future enemy. Initially, Edison worked for Western Union, inventing gadgets to improve their services, but it wasn't long before he just decided to play both sides of the field. Laugh, Edison's first major coup came with the quadruplex telegraph. This ingenious device could just send 4 messages simultaneously over a single wire, doubling Western Union's efficiency. The company paid him handsomely, laugh, but Edison had bigger plans. He secretly sold the rights to a rival, Jay Gould's Atlantic and Pacific Telegraph Company, sparking a full-blown corporate scandal. Western Union felt so betrayed, and Edison's reputation as a double-crosser was actually born. But Edison didn't stop there. Laugh, he started filing patent after patent related to telegraph technology, creating a web of intellectual property that made it really difficult for anyone to innovate without actually stepping on his toes. When Western Union tried to develop its own improvements, laugh, Edison's lawyers were quick to pounce, filing infringement lawsuits left and right. It was a game of legal chess, and Edison was determined to checkmate his whole opponent. The feud reached a boiling point when Western Union decided to fight back. Laugh. They hired their own team of inventors to challenge Edison's patents, arguing that many of his ideas were based on just like existing technology. The resulting court battles were just a slugfest of technical jargon and shady business practices. Edison used every trick in the book, from bribing witnesses to withholding evidence, to protect his patent. In the end, Western Union and Edison reached an uneasy truce. They formed a patent pool, agreeing to share their technologies and split the profits. But the damage was just done. Edison's reputation as a ruthless patent warrior, laugh, was solidified, and his relationship with Western Union remained strained for years. This telegraph saga set the stage for his future battles, proving that in Edison's world, business was war and patents were the weapons of choice. As he walked away from the telegraph wars, Edison was already eyeing his next frontier, like the whole unpredictable world of mining. Just like when you thought Edison couldn't get more ambitious, he decided to ditch the world of electronics and dive headfirst into the gritty realm of mining, convinced that iron ore mining could be revolutionized with his patented machinery. Laugh, Edison poured millions of dollars and years of his life into a venture that would ultimately become his most spectacular kind of failure. Edison's vision was grand: build massive steam-powered ore crushers and magnetic separators that could extract iron from low-grade ore. He filed patents for everything from conveyor belts to magnetic systems, believing he had cracked the code to cheap, efficient mining. Laugh. His company, the Edison Ore Milling Company, boasted state-of-the-art the whole art equipment and a team of engineers ready to change the industry. But here says the catch: Edison's mining machines were overly complex and incredibly expensive to operate. The magnetic separators, his pride and joy, often just broke down, and the crushers couldn't handle the volume of ore needed to turn a profit. Despite endless tweaks and patent upgrades, the technology just didn't work as planned. And yet, Edison refused to give up. He kept pouring money into research, filing more patents for whatever improvements that rarely delivered result. As the losses piled up, Edison's investors grew restless. They demanded results, but all they got were more promises and legal battles. Edison sued rival mining companies for allegedly stealing his patented designs, even though his own technology was so far from perfected. It was just a classic case of Edison using the patent system as a shield, trying to protect a failing venture rather than just admitting defeat. By 1899, after nearly a decade of struggling, Edison finally threw in the towel. The ore milling company went bankrupt, taking with it millions of dollars and Edison's reputation. As an infallible inventor, the mining debacle was a humbling lesson. But instead of learning from his mistakes, Edison simply moved on to his next obsession, leaving a trail of broken patents and disappointed investors in his wake. Little did he know. Maybe his next big idea would once again pit him against some of the most brilliant minds of his time. After the mining fiasco, Edison needed a win. He found his next obsession in the world of batteries, convinced that lead-acid batteries were too unreliable. So he set out to create the perfect nickel-iron alkaline battery, not just for cars, but for a whole new era of portable electricity. But as always, Edison didn't just want to invent, laugh, he wanted to dominate, and that meant starting another round of patent battles. Edison's battery research was pretty intense. He spent years testing thousands of materials, often working 18-hour days in his lab. When he finally had a breakthrough in 1901, he just rushed to the patent office, filing claims that covered everything from the battery's chemical composition to its casing design. But he wasn't just the only one in the battery game. Like rival inventors and companies like the electric storage battery company, ESPA, were also developing their own versions, and Edison saw them as nothing but copycat. The patent war began when ESPA launched a battery that Edison claimed infringed on his designs. His lawyers flooded the courts with lawsuits arguing that ESPA had stolen his secret formula. Meanwhile, Edison took to the press calling SBMC's products inferior knockoffs and painting himself as the victim of corporate espionage. It was a classic case of Edison just using public opinion to actually strengthen his legal position. But the SIB didn't back down so easily. They countered with their own patents and evidence that their technology was developed independently. The legal battle dragged on for years, consuming both companies' resources. Edison, ever the stubborn fighter, refused to negotiate. He even tried to sabotage SSB's business by convincing car manufacturers to use only his batteries, threatening them with patent lawsuits if they didn't just comply. Despite his aggressive tactics, Edison's battery business never really took off. The automotive industry favored lighter, more efficient designs, and his nickel-iron batteries were so too heavy and expensive. But even in the face of failure, Edison kept fighting. He continued to file new patents for battery improvements, determined to prove that his technology was actually superior. The battery wars showed a side of Edison that was both brilliant and ruthless. So a man who would rather burn bridges than admit he might be wrong. And as he wrapped up this chapter, Edison was already eyeing his next target, like the fledgling world of motion pictures. When Edison turned his attention to motion pictures in the 1890s, he didn't just want to invent a new way to entertain people, he wanted to own the entire industry. His kinetoscope, a peephole viewer that showed like short films, was an instant sensation. But instead of sharing the wealth, Edison launched a ruthless campaign to monopolize every aspect of movie. Just making through patent. Edison's strategy was so simple. File as many patents as possible, covering everything from camera designs to film projection techniques. He even tried to patent the concept of free moving pictures, guy itself. Then he formed the Motion Picture Patents Company, MPP, a cartel. that included other major players like Eastman Kodak. Together, they controlled the supply of film stock cameras and like distribution channels, effectively shutting out independent like filmmakers. Any studio or inventor who dared to challenge the MPP piece faced immediate legal action. Edison's lawyers sent cease and desist letters by the dozen, suing small production companies for so infringing on his patent. Independent filmmakers, often referred to as outlaws, were forced to operate in secret, moving their studios to remote locations like Hollywood to evade Edison's reach. It was the original Hollywood blacklist, and Edison was actually the judge, jury, and actually executioner. But the MPPC's reign of terror didn't go unchallenged. So inventors like Thomas Arnott and William Fraser Green claimed they had developed projection technology before Edison, and they fought back in court. Meanwhile, European filmmakers free from the control of the MPPC, Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, began creating their own innovative techniques. Edison responded by launching an international patent war, trying to enforce his whole U.S. patents overseas. So the MPP tactics eventually backfired, their strict control stifled creativity, and led to a wave of public backlash. In 1912, the U.S. government sued the MPP for antitrust violations, and the cartel was actually finally broken up. Edison, who had spent years trying to crush his competition, was left with a tarnished reputation and a shrinking share of the booming film industry. But even in defeat, he couldn't resist one last fight, like dragging out the legal battles, until he was finally forced to admit that his days of monopolizing innovation were just over. When Nikola Tesla stepped onto the scene with his revolutionary alternating current, a technology, he unwittingly became Edison's most formidable opponent. Edison, already deeply invested in his direct current DC power empire, saw Tesla and as an existential threat. So unkey, and he wasn't about to go down without a fight. What ensued was a battle not just of technology but of egos, money, and the future of electricity. Tesla, a brilliant Serbian-American inventor, had developed an S system that could transmit electricity over vast distances with minimal loss. George Westinghouse, recognizing its potential, bought Tesla's patents and began building power plants. Edison, in response, launched a smear campaign that bordered on propaganda. He hired engineers to electrocute animals, including a circus elephant named Topsy Laugh, sort of like accusing exile all in front of the press to prove that it was deadly. He even coined the term electrocution to associate AP with death. But Edison's tactics went beyond sensational stunts. His lawyers flooded the courts with patent infringement lawsuits against Westinghouse, claiming that app technology stole ideas from his DC patent. Tesla, just caught in the crossfire, was vilified in the media as Edison's mad scientist rival. Meanwhile, Edison secretly funded the development of the electric chair, insisting on using X to execute criminals, further linking the technology to death and danger. The public was divided. So Edison's PR machine painted as a monster, while Westinghouse and Tesla argued that it was the key to affordable, widespread electricity. The turning point came in 1893 when Westinghouse as a system was chosen to power the world. Columbian Exposition in Chicago, dazzling visitors with its efficiency, despite Edison's best efforts. Was always winning the war. In the end, Edison's DC system couldn't compete. It became the standard for power distribution, leaving Edison set patents and investments in tatters. But Edison never fully accepted defeat. He continued to publicly denounce ACT until his dying day. a testament to his stubborn refusal to admit he might have been wrong. The battle between Edison and Tesla wasn't just a technological showdown, just like sort of uncanny. It was a clash of two very different visions for the future, and it forever changed how we think about innovation, competition, and the darker side of genius. Edison didn't just invent gadgets. He also mastered the art of weaponizing the patent system. His secret weapon flooding the United States Patent Office with an avalanche of applications. Sort of like uncouth strategy that became known as thesis paper war daily. If he couldn't beat rivals with better technology, he'd bury them in red tape. Edison's lab in West Orange, New Jersey operated like a patent factory. His team of researchers didn't just tinker with prototypes, so they spent hours documenting every minor tweak and variation. Edison believed in the Shan quantity over quality approach to patents. If he filed enough applications, he reasoned, so he could corner the market on any emerging technology. The process was so meticulous. Whenever an inventor in his lab had an idea, no matter how small, Edison's legal team would draft a patent application. They used vague language and broad claims to cover as many potential uses as possible. One of his assistants once joked that Edison would patent the air if he could figure out how to profit from it. This tactic had a twofold effect. First, it created a legal minefield for competitors. Filing a patent in Edison's shadow just meant risking an infringement lawsuit, even if the technology was only tangentially related. Second, it overwhelmed the patent office with thousands of Edison's applications, clogging the system. Examiners struggled to keep up, so often rubber stamping his claims just to clear the backlog. Edison's rivals complained bitterly. Nikola Tesla called it house legalized piracy din, while George Westinghouse accused him of using the patent system to stifle innovation. But Edison didn't care. He saw patents as a form of intellectual property warfare, and so he was willing to play pretty dirty to win. By the early 1900s, Edison held over 1,000 patents in the U.S. alone, a record that still stands today, but quantity didn't always equal quality. Many of his patents were for just incremental improvements or ideas that just never made it to market. Still, Edison's paper war was effective. It allowed him to maintain control over industries like telegraphy, phonography, and early film, even when his technology wasn't the best. And as he geared up for his next battle, he'd prove that he wasn't afraid to use the patent system just as a bludgeon against anyone who just stood in his way. When it came to patent lawsuits, Edison wasn't just a litigant, sort of like Untech. He was a showman. Stepping into the courtroom, he transformed from inventor to actor, using drama, theatrics, and a healthy dose of manipulation to sway judges and juries. His legal battles were less about justice and more about putting on a performance that would crush his opponents. During the famous War of the Currents, Edison took the witness stand against George Westinghouse's technology. Instead of sticking to technical facts, he turned the hearing into a sideshow. He dramatically demonstrated how it could electrocute small animals, using the gruesome spectacle to paint Westinghouse's system as a public safety nightmare. Reporters ate up the show, and just like headlines blared warnings about frustrated literary nature of Edison's talent for theatrics extended beyond the witness box. In patent disputes over the phonograph, he staged elaborate demonstrations in court, showing off his latest models while dismissing his rivals' inventions as inferior imitations. He knew that visual appeal mattered exactly as much as legal arguments, and he wasn't afraid to use props like slides or even live sound recordings to make his case. But Edison's courtroom antics weren't just for show. He also employed psychological warfare. He would deliberately arrive late to hearings, keeping judges and opponents waiting, or peppercross examinations with sarcastic remarks. When facing inventors who challenged his patents, he'd just belittle their work, calling them patents, amateur solid tech daily copycats drive in front of the jury. One of his most audacious moves came during a film patent lawsuit. Facing claims that his kaleidoscope wasn't just original, Edison produced a series of backdated notebooks, allegedly proving he'd invented the technology years earlier. Critics accused him of forgery, but Edison's charm and the lack of concrete evidence allowed him to skate by. These courtroom performances often paid off, even when the facts were against him. Edison's charisma and showmanship sometimes tipped the scales in his favor, but his tactics also earned him a reputation as a ruthless fighter who would stop at nothing to win. As his legal battles raged on, it became clear that in Edison's world, the courtroom was just like another stage, sort of like uncut, and he was always the star of the show. While Edison was hailed as a genius by the public, many of his fellow inventors saw him in a far less flattering light to them. He wasn't just a competitor, so unka. He was Ars Patent Bulinic, who used the legal system to bully and suppress innovation. The resentment towards Edison simmered beneath the surface of the 19th and early 20th century tech world, fueling a growing chorus of critics. Nikola Tesla, perhaps Edison's most famous rival, openly condemned his patent tactics. Tesla believed that innovation should be collaborative, not a cutthroat battle for intellectual property. He once said that Edison had no hobby except his work, so no other aim than to be the first, and so to make as much money as possible. Guy for Tesla, Edison's obsession with patents stifled true progress. George Westinghouse, who endured years of legal attacks from Edison, viewed him as a business predator. Westinghouse's engineers complained that Edison's lawyers would just pounce on any new invention, filing infringement claims at the slightest resemblance to his patents. The constant threat of lawsuits just forced Westinghouse to spend millions on legal defense, money that could have gone into research and development. Even just Thomas Edison, a co-inventor of the motion picture projector, felt like Edison's ruthless. His technology was crucial to the success of early film projection, but Edison claimed the invention as his own through a series of shady patent maneuvers. Publicly accused Edison of stealing credit and using his wealth and influence to rewrite history. Among European inventors, Edison's reputation was even worse. French filmmakers who had built thriving independent industries saw the MPP's patent lawsuits as an American attempt to colonize global cinema. They mocked Edison as a greedy monopolist who cared more about profits than creativity. These criticisms weren't just personal grudges. They highlighted a fundamental divide in the world of invention. So while Edison believed patents were essential for protecting investment, his rivals argued that his aggressive tactics discouraged risk-taking and innovation. As Edison's empire expanded, the label of Cake Patent Bully Sun literally clung to him, casting a shadow over his otherwise brilliant legacy. In the late 19th century, newspapers and magazines weren't just reporting on Edison's patents. They were crafting his larger-than-life debater persona. The media turned his legal feuds into serialized dramas, painting him as either a heroic innovator defending his turf or a cantankerous bully throwing his weight around. This carefully curated image wasn't just entertainment, it was a powerful tool in Edison's ongoing patent wars. New York's Yellow Press loved framing Edison's lawsuits as David vs. Goliath tales, even when Edison was the Goliath. When he sued Western Union over telegraph patents, headlines proclaimed, "Wake, Edison battles corporate giant Layla, his own multi-million-dollar empire." Journalists played up his rough and tumble background, just dropping out of school, working as a telegraph boy. To make him seem like an underdog, even as his lawyers buried rivals in paperwork. But the media also couldn't resist mocking Edison's more absurd legal moves when he tried to patent a system for mining iron ore, which later flopped. So newspapers joked that he'd sooner patent the art of digging holes. When, just cartoons of the era showed him as a mustachioed mad scientist wielding a patent document like a club or trampling over tiny inventors. Edison didn't just passively accept this coverage, he actively manipulated it. He granted exclusive interviews to friendly reporters, leaking details of pending lawsuits to gain public sympathy. During the DC wars, he fed journalists like horror stories about daily electrocution, like accidents, even if they were exaggerated or false. His PR team knew that a scared public was more likely to side with his DT technology, but there was a backlash. So as Edison's patent battles became more ruthless, some publications started calling him out. New York Times for once editorialized that his litigious habits fui daily a menace to progress, full arguing that his constant lawsuits discouraged other inventors from sharing ideas. Magazines like Giant Scientific American criticized his monopolistic tendencies, sonic balancing the hero worship with critical analysis.
By the early 1900s, Edison's debater's image was so ingrained that even his friends joked about it. When he lost a key film patent case, a colleague quipped, "Tom, you were getting soft laugh, so sort of like what you used to win these fights before lunch." The media had turned his legal aggression into a brand, both boosting his fame and tarnishing his legacy. As Edison entered his later years, this carefully crafted persona would come back to haunt him in unexpected ways. As Edison entered his 60s and 70s, the patent battles that had defined his career began to take a toll. The once inexhaustible inventor, found himself struggling to keep up with younger, hungrier competitors, just like and his old tactics of intimidation and litigation were starting to lose their bite. The world was changing, and Edison's rigid approach to patents was looking increasingly outdated. One of his final major fights came in the realm of sound films. Edison believed that his kinetophone a system that synchronized film with phonograph recordings like tool was the future of cinema. But when rival companies like Warner Bros. Developed more advanced sound, unlike film technology, Edison sued for patent infringement, claiming they'd stolen his idea. The problem Edison's technology was clunky and unreliable, while the new systems were smoother and more versatile, like juries and judges, now more familiar with complex tech disputes, were less impressed by Edison's theatrics.
In 1927, when Warner Bros. Released Raider, the jazz singer Lycan, the first successful talking film, it became clear that Edison's approach was so obsolete. His lawsuits dragged on for years, but he never managed to stop the new technology.
Edison also faced challenges in the world of radio. He filed patents for early radio transmitters, but Guglielmo Marconi and others had really pushed the technology forward. When Edison sued Marconi in 1913, claiming his patents covered basic radio principles, the case dragged on until 1934. After radio had become a household fixture, the court eventually ruled against Edison, a humiliating defeat for the once unstoppable patent warrior. These latent life losses revealed a vulnerable side of Edison. He was no longer the young innovator able to outmaneuver rivals. So he was a relic of a bygone era, clinging to outdated patents in a rapidly changing world. His health began to fail, and he spent more time in his lab reminiscing than launching new campaigns. By the 1930s, Edison empire was crumbling. Younger inventors like Lee DeForest and Edwin Armstrong were creating technologies that owed so little to his work, and the public was actually more interested in the new heroes of innovation than the aged Nikola wizard of Menlo Park. Final years were marked by a quiet resignation, so life just sort of like far cry from the brash, combative figure of his prime. When he died in 1931, he left behind a complicated legacy, a man who changed the world through invention, but also someone who spent decades fighting to control it. Edison's approach to patents left a paradoxical mark on history. Uncaught, both a catalyst for innovation and a break on its free flow. Modern scholars wrestle with his legacy, torn between praising his business acumen and condemning his monopolistic tactics. The question at the heart of this debate: did Edison's patent wars drive progress or stifle it? On one hand, Edison's aggressive patenting did spur investment in research. His lab in Menlo Park set the model for corporate R&D, proving that systematic invention could be really so profitable. By protecting his ideas, he convinced investors to fund risky projects from electric lighting to motion pictures without his legal muscle. Some argue the rapid electrification of America might have really stalled. His patent strategy also forced the tech industry to define intellectual property rights. Edison's battles with Tesla and Westinghouse clarified legal precedents for decades, shaping how patents are awarded and enforced today. Even his critics just admit that he inadvertently pushed the patent system to evolve, however painfully, but the dark side is hard to ignore. Edison's lawsuits against independent filmmakers drove so many out of business, delaying the creative explosion of early cinema. His refusal to license patents slowed the adoption of efficient power grids, costing consumers and businesses like millions. Economists later calculated that his monopolies in telegraphy and phonography actually slowed technological progress by discouraging competition. Modern innovators have mixed feelings. Steve Jobs, who also used patents so aggressively, once called Edison type a genius at commercialization. But a bully in the boardroom, ego like Elon Musk, who openly shares Tesla's patents, dismissed Edison's tactics as mean protectionist nonsense. The debate continues in Silicon Valley. Should patents be swords or shield? Edison's legacy also reveals a timeless tension in innovation. Is it better to share ideas freely like Tesla or hoard them for profit like Edison? History suggests neither extreme works perfectly. Edison's side patents built empires but also created bottlenecks like Tesla's idealism advanced technology but left him broke. As we look back, Edison's patent will serve as a cautionary tale. They remind us that innovation isn't tied just about brilliant ideas, just Unkit sign, about how we share, protect, and fight for them. And in that messy interplay of greed, ego, and genuine discovery, maybe we get a truer picture of what it means to be a pioneer. Peeling back the debater label reveals a far more complex figure than the one-dimensional patent warrior of legend. Edison wasn't just a litigious inventor, he was a product of his era, a shrewd businessman, and a flawed genius whose contradictions define both his success and his downfall. To understand him is to grapple with the messy reality of innovation itself. At his core, Edison was a pragmatist. He once said, "Daily, I find out what the world needs, so then I go ahead and try to invent it." Whatever mindset drove him to chase profits, sometimes at the expense of ethics. His patent battles weren't just about protecting ideas, they were about survival in a cutthroat, gilded economy where monopolies were the norm, not the exception. But there was definitely genuine idealism, too. Despite his ruthlessness, Edison believed in the power of technology to improve lives. His obsession with the light bulb wasn't just about money. Gesture it about banishing darkness. Even in his mining failure, he saw a chance to revolutionize industry. His flaws weren't a lack of vision, but an inability to separate that vision from his own ego. Edison's relationship with his peers was equally complex. He stole credit from assistants, but he also created the first modern research team where scientists could just collaborate. He bullied rivals, but he also mentored young inventors, including a young Henry Ford. His legacy is a mix of inspiration and intimidation. So, just a reminder that genius often coexists with arrogance. In the end, Edison Stack's debater-type persona was both mask and reality. He weaponized patents because he thought it was the only way to win, but he also trapped himself in a cycle of conflict. By the end of his life, he just seemed tired of the fight, admitting in a rare moment of candor, "Fontes I have had so many battles that I'm almost always willing to let others have the right of way. Dating. So maybe the real lesson of Edison isn't about patents or lawsuits. It's about the tension between creation and control. So between the urge to share ideas and the fear of losing them. In that sense, his story isn't just history left. Just unkits at that mirror held up to every innovator who said never wondered, how much should I fight for my ideas and at what cost? As we drift off, maybe we can smile at the irony of it all, laugh. The man who wanted to light up the world spent half his life in the legal trenches arguing over who held the patent to the light switch. Sleep well, knowing that even the greatest minds sometimes just trip over their own egos, sort of like uncut, and that's just part of being human. Now that we've unpacked Edison's tangled relationship with patents, it's worth remembering that every inventor carries a mix of ambition and vulnerability. He might have been a crisp debater, runner chief in the courtroom, but behind the lawsuits was a guy who just stayed up all night chasing dreams, laughed just like anyone trying to make something new. As the story fades into the quiet, think of Edison not as a villain or a saint, but as a flawed pioneer navigating uncharted territory. His battles remind us that innovation is never so clean or simple, sort of like it's messy, emotional, and sometimes a little bit petty. So let go of the day as stories like Edison eventually let go of his endless lawsuits. The world keeps turning, ideas keep flowing, and even the biggest patent bullies, etc., laugh, eventually rest, sleep, easy, knowing that tomorrow stories are waiting to be told, sort of unco without a single cease and desist letter in sight.